Hey, y'all. We got some known mic issues on Eliot for this episode. We fixed it for next week. So I apologize for this week. Nothing we can do about it. Enjoy the episode. Welcome back to Following Know It on a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 178, and we're in chapters 38 through 43 of The Hero of Ages. Eliot, how are you?
Doing excellent as usual after reading a Brandon Sanderson book. I'm enjoying this one. Definitely enjoying this one.
Paul?
Likewise. At the time that this is out, I believe it'll definitely be New Year's because we're close to New Year's here as we record. And so this New Year, this is unrelated. I'm gonna start rereading the Stormlight Archive, the main series. And I'm curious to see what tidbits I pick up on reread. So that's super exciting. But as far as Mistborn here, Hero of Ages, super excited as well. Lots of great stuff to talk about this week.
We do. We will get a full summary of events from Eliot after the intro, but suffice it to say, there are some very interesting things in 38 through 43. All right, Eliot, would you like to summarize it for us?
Sure. Chapter 38, we hang out with Spook and Sazed and Breeze. Spook is still trying to figure out what to do against Quellion, the citizen who had taken control of the city. The city's name, Urto? Isn't that the name of the city?
Yeah, Orto. They pronounce it with more of an O than a U in the book,
Yeah.
so Orto.
So in Orto, they works through that. Stays and Breeze are also trying to strategize how they're going to help overthrow this little mini warlord that's taken over there. 39 takes us back to Hensoon, and we get a little lesson. We get some education on how conjure work and their blessings and how it ties into hemalurgy. We get a lot of information done in 39 for sure. Chapter 40 are our heroes. Learn more about Polos and we start to put together a lot of what we've learned about hemalurgy. And so a lot of pieces are starting to come together for at least Ellen, I think, at this point is starting to understand quite a bit. In chapter 41, we get a pretty epic scene where Spook does save a young girl from execution by burning building. I didn't know burning building was an option for execution, but apparently it is. And let's see. Oh, we get Marsh. We get Marsh perspective. That's right. And he infiltrates Luthadel and gets a spike embedded in Penrod, which is pretty huge. Very detailed. Tend to fail, but actually succeed at what you were going after. Get the spike in his heart. And then we wrap up 43 with Vin and Ellen showing up to another ball, and that's it.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's it.
You
We'll
That's
know,
see y'all next week.
the end of the book.
Yeah.
The chapter with Tensoon is actually the one that I am, well, second most interested to talk about. We get quite a few like direct answers from Tensoon about how conjure work, and I don't know if I was really expecting to get this information right here. But he pretty much answers for us exactly what the blessings are, how conjure work, how you go from Mistwraith to conjure, and etc. etc. So, Elliot, what did you think of this? It's all done with hemalurgy, I guess.
yeah, I expected it to be something. I don't know what I expected, but for some reason didn't. I wasn't guessing it was going to be just straight up hemalurgy.
Right.
It's taking this inanimate. It's not inanimate. It's more less sentient creature, the Mistwraith, and bringing to it the awareness, the thought, the emotions that come with kind of life through hemalurgy, which is pretty cool. And we get definitions for all the blessings. I actually learned something as I was as I started doing a tiny bit of research, Tensoon uses the word sapience. What?
Okay.
And I scratched my head because the word that I usually use for that kind of awareness or is sentience. And so I looked up, well, what's the difference between sapience and sentience? And they're similar, but apparently, according to Google, sapience is more like thought and rationality, and sentience is more emotion and instinct. And so
Okay.
sapience kind of leans towards the direction of like AI. It's more logic and rationality, whereas sentience is like humanity, the emotional instinct side of things. And interesting that Tensoon uses the word sapient instead of sentience. But that might be a complete bunny trail. Definitely learned a lot.
I have to say, as a kind of an aside, this whole process, like, this is a magic system, and this process of a Mist Wraith becoming a Khandra is like the application of a magic system, somewhat, right? And I just have to say, it seems very not magical. You know,
Yeah.
hemalurgy, I feel like maybe the least magical magic system we've seen. I'm like, one, it's very. I mean, I still don't. I'm not going to act like I fully understand it still right now, but it's very logical of like, do this equals this, you know?
Right.
Whereas, like, I feel like others you have to kind of like learn to command or to use or to harness like a power. This is like, put this stick in that person here, then it works, you know?
Right.
And it's very non-magical, and then just like the grotesqueness of it, you know. It's not like someone was flooded with Stormlight or this like investiture, like whatever, something kind of pretty and magical and stuff. It was just like, we stuck some rods in him.
Yeah.
Now he has superpowers. You know, like, it's just kind of crazy to me. Anyways, that's just my tidbit. It's not that helpful, but I was thinking it, so now I have to say it.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that I hesitate to use the word science, like there's a science behind it or maybe math behind it, but like you said, there's a formula of if you do this way, this will happen every time. Whereas other magic systems that we've seen from Brandon aren't necessarily that cut and dry. So, what about the blessings, the blessing of potency, the blessing of presence? Those are the two. I believe those are the two spikes that Tensoon has hidden. Um, so let me get this straight. I think he returns. Does he return to the homeland without his own blessing because he thinks they're going to take it from him? So he like stashes it and then returns without it?
Well, what I got from one of the biggest things I got from the chapter was that their blessing is actually what is providing them their sapience, is the word he uses.
Right.
So I think he can't be without one,
Okay. So
or he
that
wouldn't be a Khandra.
so does he have one and pick up the other?
I think so.
Okay. Cuz
If they were to take his blessing, I think they would take away his almost his soul, if
his
you will.
yeah, his mind.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so Sir had one of them and he took it off of his dead body when he killed him and then he stashed it. But then
right.
okay. So then he kept his own. Okay. The I do think it's interesting that both Khandra and Kolos are kind of just this byproduct of hemalurgy more than like their own real what sort of looking for species, I guess. Like Kolos are just dead humans with spikes in them, and then Khandra are alive Mistwraiths with spikes in them. So I don't know. I guess I was expecting more division between Chondra and Mistwraiths than it's just a matter of a hemalurgic spike or two.
I mean, they're basically scientific experiments,
Right.
right? You mentioned science. Hemalurgy is a lot like science. Long was just experimenting with hemalurgy, and oh wow, if I do this with all these human bodies, it becomes a koloss. I could build an army with this. And you can just kind of see the progression of if we do this and then this happens, and if we do this and this happens. And yeah, you along the way you get Conjuring, and along the way you get Olas, which kind of the same thing. One with a Mistwraith body and one with a human body.
Yeah. Anything else on Chondra? Did we learn anything else in that chapter?
To what Eliot was saying, it's kind of like a Frankenstein's monster kind of
Oh yeah.
experiment, I think.
Yeah.
Adding to that, it was just like, well, we could make this work again, you know. And something else I was going to add also to what Trevor was saying at first. You're talking about how I'm paraphrasing you, but just kind of like, you know, what makes a Chondra and what makes a Koloss isn't necessarily that wild, or I'm saying magical again. It's like it's just a couple of spikes that make them like move from something more simplistic, I guess, to something more complex. But this would actually be something that I would be curious to hear more of Brandon's thought process on of this magic system, because I think all the other magic systems, I feel like I could point to something with like a notable complexity. You know, like breaths, there's a lot of complexity in like the heightenings and what it unlocks for you. Stormlight, there's a lot of stuff that I don't want to talk about without a spoiler veil, but there's stuff with Stormlight. There's with the metals, even there's a lot of metals that are like obscure, and there's a lot that do a lot of weird abstract things and stuff. But the hemalurgy, it seems a little bit like the odd one out. I don't mean to just make this a hemalurgy talk, but I wouldn't call it the odd one out. I just think we don't see maybe what the complexity of it, or if you will, like that kind of thing is. I don't know if we see that. And I would be curious to hear from Brandon, like his perspective of like, why did he choose this? Did he choose it artistically as like this is a grotesque, like a kind of shocking system that like has an effect on the reader, right? Because you see it as gross and, you know, you associate pain and all the things, right? Or is there like another purpose for it? I guess I would be curious to know. I'm sure there's words of Brandon out there somewhere that I don't know about, or maybe he talks about it more. But that's something that I'd be curious to know.
I'm curious what you would think if you had read Elantris. And I may bring this back up after you read Elantris, because there's one more major magic system that we've seen that you haven't read yet, that might give you more context for, like, it might help you frame hemalurgy and its strict rules a little better. Because Elantris acts very differently than everything else. So
I'm currently like a chapter and a half in, so I'll be there soon. You know.
I'm almost wondering if the complexity with hemalurgy is going to come with its interaction with the other systems. It's we've seen hemalurgy be able to essentially steal allomancy. I'm not sure I've fully wrapped my head around how maybe feruchemy and hemalurgy might play together, but hemalurgy basics were fairly straightforward, which I feel like I've got a good understanding of at this point. You spike somebody and you steal their power, either allomantic or just. I think at one point we got an epigraph that told us you spike just a random person and you get tiniest amount of power.
Right.
now resides in your spike, and then go implant your hemalurgic spike in somebody else, and you powers or abilities, and how you do that matters. But like how that plays with allomancy, how that plays with feruchemy, how it plays with other systems, if that's even possible. Like maybe there's the possibilities get infinite.
Yeah. Spiking and pulling it into other magic systems gets really weird really fast. So that could get strange if somebody took it off of Scadrial. Let's jump over to Vin and Elend. We get 2 chapters from Vin and Elend in this episode. The first one is they kind of have a bivouac set up out front of Fadrex, and they pull their leaders together and they have a meeting about Ruin. This is their first time that they're like telling everybody in the group about Ruin, and they discuss how Kolos are made, and they don't know how Conjure are made yet, but they talk about Kolos. They talk about um, spikes and et cetera, et cetera, and they are really trying to figure out exactly why Ruin is doing the moves that he's doing. So they go and they try to make maps of where the Koloss are moving and what exactly is happening in the greater scheme. Not just that they don't really care about Fadrex. All they want to see is the tablet, the metal etching in the storage cache. But beyond that, they're really trying to figure out, okay, what is Ruin doing? And right in the middle of this, some of the soldiers have like a brawl, and there's the term the Mistfallen has arisen from the soldiers that were affected by the mist but recovered. They are deemed the Mistfallen, and they're kind of ostracized from the rest of the army, which Demu is included in that. So Ellen's army is kind of falling apart here because he's not getting reinforcements, and who he has with him is they're kind of having some issues. What did you guys think of this scene, this meeting scene?
Felt like our heroes were getting a lot of information that we've already had for a little while.
Yeah.
We've we've kind of figured out hemalurgy. We've kind of figured out Kolos at this point. They're just kind of putting all the pieces together. But yeah, we're still stuck with a lot of questions about Ruin. We know, I think we know Ruin's motive is to ruin, make the world pure chaos. Yeah, do it in a very systematic and precise way, apparently. But what are the near term motives? What are the next steps that Ruin is going to take? And more importantly, what in the world can our heroes even do about it?
Right.
I think that's the big question is can we even stop Ruin?
Yeah. Eliot, going back to you. We've gone back and forth on this a couple times. Is the mist of Ruin? Is the 16% thing of Ruin? Or is it of something else?
Yeah, I don't know. It feels very Ruin-ish. It seems like it's not good. Ruin is trying to destroy the world. Mist is a part of that. Block the sun. They can't grow food. I don't know. But the very precise 16% of people get struck by the mist and all of that. Does that align with the what seems like it should be more chaotic methods
Right.
we've talked about Ruin is trying to take order and create chaos, entropy.
Mm-hmm.
Ruin is trying to just wreck the world, albeit maybe in a logical way. So, in a being like that acts so precisely, I think so, but maybe not.
Yeah,
I
the
think it's
whole
ruined.
the whole 16% thing just seems so surgical to
Yeah.
be ruined. It's too accurate to the man, as they say, and that's what is flagging them on it. Is if this was ruin, why is it 16%? Why isn't it 100%? You know, like.
I don't know.
All right, I want to talk about Spook. Do we have anything else for the Mistfallen? We'll get back to the ball here in a second, but I want to talk about Spook.
I also want to talk about Spook.
Okay, so Spook, we get a POV chapter from him. He goes into the burning building, saves the innocent young girl and uh, the other 9 people in there, or however many people there are, and he has now the moniker the Survivor of the Flames from the people of Orto, which is a direct reference to the survivor of Kelsier. And Spook has this voice in his head who he calls Kelsier. And this chapter is really where you really start thinking what is going on with this voice. Because Kelsier, I believe the chapter, I might be wrong with this, but I believe the chapter starts with you, the voice saying, "You might have to kill them." And then when he gets into the building, the voice, Kelsier says, or screams, "Kill them." And where have we heard that before? Just a voice screaming, "Kill them," over and over.
Sorry, Zane. Zane.
Zane.
Mm-hmm.
And did we ever get a confirmation on who Zane was talking to?
All we
I
know
don't.
is that it was something external from him.
Right.
Right. We got confirmation that he was not insane.
Right. Or at least the voice was telling him he wasn't insane.
True. True. But then we compared that directly soon after that to Marsh. We
Yeah.
learned
Yeah.
too long after that Marsh was hearing the kill them in his head. So yeah, this voice in Spook's head just seems too similar. So either they're all hearing ruin, or none of them are hearing ruin,
Okay.
is what I would say.
Yeah.
If
So we
if Zane and Marsh are hearing ruin, Spook is too. If for somehow some reason there's a twist and Marsh and Zane were not hearing ruin, then okay, maybe Spook is hearing something different.
Okay. I think it's a decent summation. Eliot, you have, not for the first time, you have the word addiction next to Spook in the outline here. What makes you say addiction?
Yeah, there's bits that are really starting to surface now
Yeah.
in Spook's interactions here of it's not just the oh maybe this is gonna turn into addiction. I think this is full on addiction. To the it's hard to pin it on one thing specifically. It's like it's to the magical power itself. He has gained the ability for Pewter after having a rather not so healthy relationship with Tin. And now we see in one of these chapters where he wants he gets he's relishing in the power of Pewter, and already he's yearning for oh if I just was a Mistborn, if I just had the power of everyone else has, and classic symptoms of addiction. You can never have enough. You always need more. You find that new high, and you just want the next one. And whatever it is, substance addiction, video game, whatever it is, it often manifests like this, of always having to satisfy that desire and never being able to.
Yeah. What does uh what does Kelsier tell him? He
Because
Spook says, "I'm not you, Kelsier. I can't do that." And Kelsier responds with, Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. What a creepy line.
Yeah.
How do y'all feel about this whole thing where people are saying Spook is, or we may say Spook is kind of like next Kelsier or something like that. He's taking on a similar style of role, and I'm curious to know what y'all think about it. I think it's interesting what you said earlier about the addiction, because you're absolutely, I think you're pretty spot on with that. Of it's like you could maybe add to addiction or substitute for addiction like greed. Of Spook was the good guy, kind of an underdog kind of good guy, because it was like, oh, he's a Tenite and he's there to help, and he has been helpful. He's been good for our team, like our heroes. But there's always been this. There's always been a want. There's always been a personal want. Initially it was he has a crush on Vin, and I think that's all well and good. And that was I don't even know if I should lump it in there with this conversation, but that's just part of it. Um, and then it was kind of this like the other heroes are the real heroes because they have these powers to do big things.
Right.
I'm just a Tenai. And then now he has the strength of Pewter. He's literally like a one of a kind and kind of a hero to many people now. And yeah, like we said, it's just this seemingly it looks like it would be a never-ending cycle of wanting more. And what if he became a Mistborn? I'm sure he would want to be like the best Mistborn because Vin has defeated the Lord Ruler. She's like the biggest, best Mistborn. Stuff like that would be my prediction if he became Mistborn, or if that just went further.
Yeah. The trying to constantly become Kelsier, all well and good to a point, but Kelsier was a little concerning on some areas of his life. So having him as your role model and people calling you the second survivor, the survivor of the flames, that has some connotation with it, namely revenge, specifically on nobles, which coincidentally, maybe not coincidentally, Spook is fighting against that of Quellion. Quellion is all about the rise of the Ska. If you have noble blood in you, we're going to kill you. Doesn't matter if that it was you or not. If your great grandparents were one was a noble, you're dead. And Spook is the one standing up against that. So I don't know. There's some irony there somewhere.
And almost double irony in a sense because Spook is trying to stop them, saying, "No, that's not what Kelsier is about. You need to stop that." And yet he's following the voice of what he thinks is Kelsier. And I think at this point we've clearly identified it's not. And so there's even another layer of irony in that he's telling them, "Oh, you need to follow the true Kelsier," but is he actually doing that?
Right. The speaking of voices in your head, Marsh shows up to Luthadel. I think this is the first time we've been back in Luthadel since the beginning of the book. Marsh shows up in Luthadel and spikes Penrod under the direct order of Ruin. And this scene came out of nowhere for me because, I mean, I haven't cared about Penrod, I mean, ever, but specifically since the Well of Ascension, we haven't really heard or noticed Penrod. So this one seems weird. It just, I mean, this means that by the time Elend and Vin get back to Luthadel, Luthadel may well be turned against them. Is the implication here? But this scene was kind of strange to me. Seemed odd. If there were interludes in a Mistborn book, this would be an interlude.
This one I was not expecting either. And we are going really far down the mind control road, it
Yeah.
seems like. We've got Marsh that is completely under the control of Ruin. We've got Kolos, who are completely under the control of somebody, anybody. We've got Spook, who seems to be falling under the control of somebody. We've got Zane was under the control of somebody. Now Penrod's under control. Like, feels like we're headed for Ruin can control everyone.
Right. Well, and in this chapter, Marsh specifically states who's the one person that Ruin's been after and hasn't been able to get?
Elend?
Elend. Ruin
Yeah.
has tried to get a spike into Elend multiple times and failed. So that there's an interesting point of Elend is or appears to be Ruin's focus as opposed to maybe somebody else in that area.
Yeah, it's not looking good for our heroes. It really is not. Between Penrod now potentially coming under the control of Ruin, to the discussion we just had a couple chapters ago about they're trying to figure out what all Ruin is doing and how do they stop him. Everything is going downhill fast, and we don't even have a plan. We
Right.
don't even have an objective. We don't even have an idea of what to do to stop Ruin. All we have is a hope that the Lord Ruler left one more clue in this cavern that will hopefully give them something to go off of. Yeah, that's all we have at this point.
Question: why do y'all think Ruin is after Ellen specifically? Is it just because he's like our prevalent character that's not Vin, or is there any ulterior motive or an additional motive you think as to why he's targeting Elend? Because I'm kind of like, why? I mean, Elend is if he's spiked Penrod, I think he's just going after these, kind of noble position holding individuals. And that is Elend, so that could be it. I don't know if the focus is on Elend because he's the one who's gotten away, or if that's like was playing number one and it's just been unsuccessful.
I imagine it's Elend because it's been stated multiple times in this book. He is an extremely powerful Mistborn, one of the original 9, quote unquote, Mistborn, and he has no idea how to control his own powers. I mean, he's getting an idea, he's getting there, but it's always been Vin has the focus and the nuance. Elend has the overwhelming power for Mistborn. So that to me would be target number 1 for Ruin. Into chapter 43, we are attending another ball, and Vin and Elend are trying to get down to the storage cache. They show up at the ball, and Vin is getting tailed by two. It's a smoker and a tin eye. Is that what it is? I don't remember. That there's two. There's
I don't
two
recall.
Allomancers that are tailing Vin. One's definitely a smoker to cover the other. The other one, I don't remember what the other one is.
Vin is very impressed with how hidden they are.
Right.
They're doing a very good job of being subtle. She never would have noticed them if she didn't have the power she does to pierce the copper clouds.
Right. And she's also in a couple chapters previous to this, she's beginning to be suspicious that her ability to pierce copper clouds is known. So I wonder if this is evidence in the other direction that they have a smoker there in the assumption that Vin can't get past that. But I'm not sure if that's a lot of great evidence. But anyway, she lures them out to a balcony and then beats them up and then hides them in a bush. and then runs downstairs. And that's where we end the episode. I chuckled to myself on this scene because I thought it was like almost cartoonish in the way that it panned out.
Very well trodden scene in the sense of lure your tail around the dark corner, beat them up and leave them in a dumpster, like very much a thing, except in this scene they're in ball gowns.
Yes.
It's young women in ball gowns doing the classic scene.
And then Slow Swift has two young men who are like not informants, but assistants to Slow Swift, and they're on Vin's side. And as Vin is just like beating the stuffing out of these ladies, they're kind of just standing there like, what do we do? They're really. I just thought that was funny because then Vin like starts stripping down in front of them because she has like her ninja gear underneath her ball gown, and it's just extremely awkward for those two poor guys.
And in the meantime, Ellen is off having this grand debate with Yeoman,
Yes.
where all he's trying to do is stall for time so that Finn can go sneak into the cavern, find the door, and get through it. And my only thought on that was, yet again, Yeoman is almost a good guy.
Yeah.
Almost. And Ellen gets a sense of this. He has a couple times already. He's arguing with him, and he almost likes Yeoman's side of the argument. He almost agrees with him. But there's just bits and pieces that are not quite there. There's the enslavement of the ska and other kind of elements that go a little bit under the radar with Yeoman, where he says a lot of good things, but not a good guy.
His biggest flaw is just believing in the divinity of the Lord Ruler. So if the Lord Ruler backs something up, then it must be good to Yeoman.
Yeah.
And so there's some key features of the final empire under the Lord Ruler that he's then forced to defend because he believes in the sovereignty of the Lord Ruler.
Well, and there's also along that exact same thought train, there's a fallacy that has popped up in a couple of our characters' thought trains of, well, maybe the Lord Ruler was actually not that bad.
Right.
And even in the Lord Ruler's messages, in his etchings, he's talking about, oh, I've done so much good for this world. I've worked so hard to get order and peace and laws and all these things. And in a lot of ways, there's some good. And in other ways, it just looks good because where we're at now is kind of worse.
Right.
We overthrew the nasty dictator tyrant guy. Oops, we also set free Ruin, the supernatural destructive force, which is making things look worse. And so, does the Lord Ruler look okay compared to Ruin? Kinda. Does that make the Lord Ruler a good guy? Definitely.
Anything else before we get to a Stormlight spoiler? I do have a couple of Stormlight spoiler stuff, but anything before that point, gentlemen? We've one chapter to go until the end of part 3? 4?
3.
3. At the end of part 3. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Stormlight spoiler. Gentlemen, we get our first I want to say canonical, but that's not what I'm trying to say. First mention. I'm just going to.
Book.
Yeah,
World?
but chronological. Our first chronological mention of Adonalsium in epigraph 39. I want to read epigraph 39. It says, even now, I can barely grasp the scope of all this. The events surrounding the end of the world seem even larger than the final empire and the people within it. I sense shards of something from long ago, a fractured presence, something spanning the void. I have delved and searched, and have only been able to come up with a single name, Adonalsium. Who or what it was I do not yet know. Is that in your version, Elliot?
I've been checking all of these whenever you've been reading. It is. There's like one word difference in all of that, so it's pretty identical.
We get the first name drop of shards. We get the it's not capitalized though. We get the first name drop of Adonalsium. So whoever is writing this is at this point the most informed person in the Cosmere. We are a little bit more informed than this author at the moment, but still exciting nonetheless. What do you guys think?
This definitely caught
Maybe
my attention. Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I was saying this definitely caught my attention, like big time. I was like, oh my goodness. I started thinking back instantly to are there other like what other places have we heard Adonalsium mentioned specifically? We hear stuff about shards that's not super uncommon, but Adonalsium is rarer to hear. Um Question, I guess. I don't. This isn't actually that important, but don't we get mention of Aiden Nalsium by the end of the Way of Kings? Isn't there a brief mention of him?
Yes, you get.
I
You
thought I
get
remembered
mention.
him.
You get mention of Adonalsium like chapter 15 of the Way of Kings. One of
Oh,
the
really?
one of your
Okay, I
first
thought it was literally on like the last page
no one of your
or something like
first
that. Anyways,
one of your first introductions to Wit is Wit walks in the door, sees Dalinar, and drops the name Adonalsium in front of him to see if he'll react. And Dalinar has no idea what he's talking about because Hoyd's just fishing to see if he's like a world hopper or if he's more Cosmere aware than he is. And Dalinar kind of just gives him a blank stare, and then Hoyd says, "Oh, never mind, carry on." So it's there, but it's hidden.
gotcha. Okay. Anyways, as far as this being brought up, I mean, like you said, as we've seen a lot of the Cosmere, I'm not like in shock. This isn't like something that's brand new information for me, I guess. But it is really awesome to see it here and see it like specifically talked about and mentioned because while we have seen other mentions, they're not always intentional or super deliberate. It may be something offhanded like that Wick quote.
If you were to read this,
My
go ahead, Elliot.
just going to throw in that my eye as well for sure. Recognize the name. Felt a little bit smug in that I know a lot more about Adonalsium than probably your typical Hero Pages reader if they've picked up Mistborn first.
Right.
This is their first name drop of that, where as ours was as scene you just described, Trevor, where it drops that name, but we know a little more about who this is, but it's feeding into my hesitations, my theories, my confusion over who is writing these epigraphs because it seems very scholarly. We don't see people get into a conversation where Adonalsium comes up unless they're some kind of scholar or historian or someone who is digging into the Cosmere.
Right.
People like Yasna and Wit and Sazed would be someone I would be too surprised to see, doing research on the Cosmere. But we've been told very first epigraph of this book was I am unfortunately the hero of ages.
Right.
So who is unfortunately the hero of ages and yet also a scholar historian of some kind who's digging into the Cosmere to know enough about Adonalsium? I feel like I don't have a character in this book that fits that description well. And they're talking specifically about events in the book. They use the word we a lot. We didn't know at the time, but we found out later. Blah blah
Right.
blah 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 blah.
Right.
So it seems like it should be one of the characters in our scenes here coming out of the last book. We were led to assume that Vin is the hero of ages. I cannot see Vin as the author of these epigraphs. It just doesn't fit. She's not the person who would even care to have a conversation about who ad nauseum is. So yeah, I'm pretty confused at this point.
Give me.
I have something to add
Go
on
ahead.
that actually. So you say that, and you are correct. However, I would actually like to offer Kelsier's name to you as that character that you're describing. While he may not be necessarily like super scholarly, specifically scholarly, he's the one who brings up all these things of like how the world quote used to be.
Yeah,
How there was like green grass and trees and flowers
yeah.
and things like that. And whenever you look at someone who may be writing about or may know about Adonalsium, I'm thinking it's someone who is they've obviously been around a long time or obviously are from another world or something like that. Like they're not just it's not just one of our like casual characters in a story. For them to know and write about Adonalsium. Um and so I'm thinking it
Well,
would have to be something tied to distant past, maybe, or someone that we haven't seen or don't know enough about, I guess.
your Kelsier thought is a very intriguing one, actually, and full Cosmere Stormlight spoilers, into all the information we have. We're pretty confirmed at this point that Kelsier is the leader of the Ghostbloods, with the information we have at the end of Rhythm of War plus Stormlight 5 prologue, right? Won't go that far to
Yes.
get.
Was
Yeah.
it just Stormlight 5 prologue? I think
The
it was just Stormlight 5.
no the name drop is at the end of Rhythm of War. The
Okay.
cameo is in the Stormlight 5 prologue.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, I'm with that train of thought, actually. That's pretty decent. Of Elsier's not so much a scholar when we saw him in Final Empire, but a leader of the Ghostbloods would absolutely be a person digging into that kind of stuff, and have that kind of knowledge. So could this be a Kelsier that's a bit further along than when we last saw him, but isn't quite as far as we see him appearing in Stormlight 5? Yeah, totally.
Elliot, what are the odds in your head that Marsh is the hero of Aegis right now?
Odds in my head that it's March. Uh,
Come on.
no,
Oh, come
2%.
on.
1.5? 1.5. Yeah,
1.5%?
yeah, small.
Oh, that's not, I mean,
So
that's
you're
not
saying
zero.
there's a chance.
That's not
Okay,
zero.
there's a chance.
Okay, follow up question. What are the odds that Marsh lives out this book?
It survives
Yeah.
0.
So there's a higher chance that he'll be the hero of ages than survive the book.
Correct.
Got it.
Okay.
And I'm very confident in that.
Thank you for
Very
that
Very
clip.
confident in that.
confident that Marsh is not
I will refer to this later. Thank you very much. Okay.
Marsh, yeah. I don't see many scenarios, if any, that Marsh is making it out of this. Can he die a hero's death? Definitely.
Right.
Does he survive? Don't think so.
Sounds good. All right. Unless you have anything else, we can jump into a Stormlight review. Anything else, gentlemen?
That's all I got.
Likewise.
Alrighty. As of the release of this episode, we are into 2024, the year of wind and truth. Eliot, I believe, is leading 3-1. I didn't check before the beginning of this episode. Is it 4-1? It might be 4-1.
I don't think it's 4-1. If it's 4-1, then I think it's 4-2. I think it's
I have it in
2
my
run
notes.
disparity.
3-1. I had 3-1 in
Okay.
the notes.
Because you held off the point. Yeah, that's right. So at the end of last episode, Paul, you held the point so that it didn't go to Eliot. You tied him. So it's 3-1.
Yes.
And it's not 4-1. It's what you. Okay, got it. So Paul's going to lead for our Stormlight review. You ready?
Yes.
Here is your chapter name. Give me a brief summary of what happened in the chapter. Swordmaster.
So this is when Kaladin meets Xyle, and learns about the shard blades. Is Xyle, I think, is tasked with training the men with how to use a shard blade. So yeah, and Kaladin grabs it and then he hears the screams. He doesn't like shard blades, all the stuff. But I think this is when Xyle is introduced.
I'm going to give it to you. You're combining a couple chapters together, but yes, this is when Kaladin meets Xyle. They don't do anything. They just kind of talk. It isn't until like a couple scenes later that they're actually dueling and training. Adolin and Renarin are there, and they're Kaladin and Bridge 4 are looking after them. But yes, Kaladin meets Xyle for the first time in Swordmaster 1.4. Paul, Eliot, would you have gotten that?
I was going that was where my head was going to, was Val. So I think I would have described a slightly different scene, but yes.
Nice. All right. Question number 2 goes to Eliot. Here's your quote ID. Yeah, I have some Voidbringers in my past too. Maybe that's why I understand you. Maybe that's why you understand me.
Voidbringers in my past. See, there's a kind of spunky undertone to that quote that I have to attribute to Lift and her discussions with Voidbringer Spren Windle.
Okay. Incorrect.
What?
Paul?
So does this have to be correct on who is speaking and who is being spoken to?
All you have to tell me is who is speaking, and then I will have quote number 2 for the response if you get this incorrect.
Yeah, because my guess was going to be exactly what Eliot's was. I was thinking the exact same thing. It's like Lift to Wendell or maybe Lift to someone else. In that case, I wasn't going to ask for this, but could you reread it right quick?
Yeah. I have some Voidbringers in my past too. Maybe that's why I understand you. Maybe that's why you understand me.
I'm kind of at a loss on this one. I have a couple names swimming around in my head. It's someone obviously being kind of snide, kind of snarky. I'm gonna guess that this is maybe a cheesy little like romance teasing bit. I'm gonna say that this is Adolin maybe talking to Shallan. But I don't think that's fully right, but that's what I'm gonna go with.
Incorrect. Here is the response. Like you said, we're Bridge 4. Your problems are my problems. What did the king do to your family?
It's more metaphorical than it is literal. Is this this to me? Back to me,
That's
right?
Eliot. Yep.
Is this a pre-betrayal moment? Is this like Paladin and Moash? I'm not sure who's who, but I guess maybe the first one is Moash to Kaladin, and then the response is Kaladin back to Moash.
Correct. That is correct.
Wow.
Moash is trying to, well, Kaladin is trying to get Moash to confide in him about what's happened in his past with his family, and he's unwilling at this point. It's back early Words of Radiance when Voidbringers is used as like a slang of like cursed.
Right.
Like they don't have an actual definition of Voidbringers at this point. It's kind of just a slang.
Right. It's just like, oh, I've got demons in my past.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Do I get a point for that or not?
Yep, you get a point. It's 1-1.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Over to Paul for your review. I didn't enjoy this one as much as I thought I would. The middle drags pretty darn bad. Is it interesting? Yeah. But I can't bring myself to care about any other character besides Shallan.
I think the non-Shallan parts are dragging. Let's just stop talking. This is Paul.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I know, right? Okay. So middle drags a little bit. Always makes me think. It always makes me lead a little bit toward Rhythm of War. Yeah, Rhythm of War.
Okay.
But I don't think that's quite right. So they said that they didn't like the book as much as they thought they would, right? That was the
Correct.
beginning of the review. So that makes me think it's not 5 stars, but they didn't hate it. I'm gonna say that they rated this a 4 out of 5. Ooh, and this is actually pretty tough for me to say. If they liked the Shalon parts, I'm leaning towards book 2 or book 4. I'm struggling to remember what happens in the middle of Words of Radiance.
I mean, it is Shalon's book.
That's true. I'm gonna final answer just stick with my gut that this is 4 to 5 stars, and that this is Rhythm of War. So I think you can still be interested in the Shalon parts of Rhythm of War.
All right, Elliot?
This. Let's fight my camera, so I missed all of Paul's thinking and didn't get to benefit from it. The book review. Yeah. Okay, so they think the non-Shalon parts are too boring. I'm gonna guess this is past Words of Radiance. They liked Words of Radiance, so now they're disappointed by Oathbringer because they don't think there's enough Shalon. And because it's Rhythm of War, right, where we come back and really kind of revisit her multiple personality thing.
Yeah.
So it's Oathbringer. It's a 2 out of 5 rating.
All right. This is a 2 out of 5 rating
Wow.
for The
That
Way of
surprises
Kings.
me.
The Way of Kings. They cannot bring themselves to care about any character besides Shalon in The Way of Kings.
You definitely chose this one because you knew we wouldn't guess that book
It's
on that one.
just makes me smile. I just think it's funny.
Mm.
All right. That is 2-1 in favor of Eliot with the 5th question in tow here. Headed towards Eliot. Eliot, what is the War of Reckoning?
War of Reckoning. The War of Reckoning. This is one of those many events in the course of like Vorid teaching. Basically, it's like the Recreants and TM and War of Reckoning.
The
Is that
War
what it's
of
called?
Reckoning.
Oh, I'm drawing a blank. War of Reckoning is yet to come. It's a future event. I'm not sure. I think this is like the for it comes with like the end of the world predictions and like what Dalinar seeing envisions the final battle.
Incorrect.
Yeah, not very confident there.
Oh,
I'm also not incredibly confident, but I have a guess. I think the War of Reckoning is so there's a lot of mentions, I think maybe more so earlier in the main story of the last time that the Voidbringers were sealed away.
Okay.
Like the last time, those however many years ago. And I think the War of Reckoning was the men and the everyone involved, the heralds and everything, involved with defeating the Voidbringers way back when.
incorrect. Both of you are overthinking it. This is a trick question. The War of Reckoning is the term used after Words of Radiance for the conflict on the Shattered Plains. The war during the Way of Kings and Words of Radiance is called the War of Reckoning, and is referred to as such in Oathbringer and Rhythm of War.
That's tough.
Yeah. That's a good refresher for me because I did not remember that.
There you go.
Absolutely.
All right, 2-1. So Eliot gets the point for 4-1 moving into next week and into 2024. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
That's tough. I did not think that they would have rated that 2 out of 5. That's a tough one.
Scraping by with some of these victories here, so I gotta get together or Paul's gonna start stomping on me.
All of them are pretty close. We'll remain 4-1 moving into next week. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot.
See ya.
Sayonara.